Big time fight in our main event at middleweight. We have a fight that was supposed to take place years ago between the Reaper, Robert Whittaker, and the man himself, Kelvin Gastelum. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. For the man to my left, your right, we have Matt Allen. You can find him on the respective socials just as easily at Matt Allen FNP. As always, both of us at Fight Night Picks. And big time week coming up, headlined by our main event, Matt. Robert Whittaker really looked to be in a bad spot with that loss sandwiched in between all of his wins. You have that loss to Israel Adesanya where he gets finished, and it's really, what are we going to get out of Whittaker? He's only 30 at this point, but back then it was like, wow, he's road worn. The wars against Yoel Romero. What are we going to get out of Whittaker? And so far, in his last two fights, you look at them, Darren Till and Jared Cannonier, he looked really good. It's great to see Whittaker out of those. For Gastelum, you look at the 5 on in. 2 wins sandwiched in between. You have a big old patty that is, well, 3 losses. And we didn't know what we were going to get out of Gastelum. Was his heart still in it? Holy smokes, was it ever? In his last fight against Ian Heinisch, it was back to basics. And he looked really, really good in that fight. So for these two guys, Gastelum, do you throw out all the losses? Well, not necessarily, but in that one Heinisch win, he looked very good. And for Whittaker, you throw out that Adesanya loss. It was a big moment for him. He loses. And in the Till fight, he looked good. And in the fight in his last time out, he looked great against Jared Cannonier. Albeit in those fights, or especially in that fight against Cannonier, was it a main event? Was it a 5-round fight?
No, it was a co-main event.
Exactly. It was a co-main event, so he's back to the 5-round atmosphere that he knows well. For Gastelum, he's fought his share of 5-round fights. His best showing in a 5-round fight, well, really, it ended very quickly. It was probably even the Bisping fight. I mean, a huge win in Shenzhen, China. He picked up a huge win there. And that's the thing. He beats Bisping. He beat Jacare. It was a close fight. He has his war against Adesanya. And from then, it was like, yeah.
Here's the thing, Craig, and I think you have to be honest to this. You give Kelvin Gastelum, you're hard on Kelvin Gastelum. Let's just be honest. You've never picked Kelvin Gastelum to win a fight on this channel, I don't think. You do pick against him a lot. So I guess I'll be Kelvin Gastelum's cheerleader for this fight. Now, I'm the biggest Robert Whittaker fan in the world. I'm only a fan of 3 fighters, and I can openly admit this right now.
Supposed to be an impartial media member.
I'm not a member of the media, Craig. You are. So I like Robert Whittaker, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier. Those are just easy fighters to like because they all have very entertaining fights, and that's the one thing about this fight that does worry me. I think Robert Whittaker's better than Kelvin Gastelum in pretty much every area of MMA, other than the wrestling, just because it's really hard to get the wrestling background if you're from Australia, unlike Kelvin Gastelum, who of course wrestled in high school and college. But for Whittaker, does he have good jiu-jitsu? Yeah, he does. And it's weird because Robert Whittaker is like Max Holloway, where he takes the coolest looking pictures wearing a gi, but you never see him do jiu-jitsu in fights. But you know that they are really good at it outside. And the weird thing about Whittaker, I always think of Eric Anders when I think of Robert Whittaker, because it is true. You think, you not only think, but you hear about how good they are in the gym with their grappling. You just aren't able to see that put into practice in the cage. But for Whittaker, we know the grappling's there. And then you want to talk about striking. His striking is as close to a 10 as you can be without a 10 being considered Israel Adesanya. He's a 9.99 out of striking. He really is. And for Whittaker, the great thing about him is his variety of shots. He can really throw anything at you. And the one thing I like about Whittaker, I like it, but I don't like it. And this is where I'm going to bring up the Till and Cannonier fight. Against Darren Till, he was hesitant. He was. I didn't think he looked good against Darren Till. And honestly, if you want to make a case that Darren Till won that fight, I'm not going to disagree with you, honestly, because I like Robert Whittaker a lot, and even I thought maybe Darren Till had won that fight. He got hurt in that fight, and the one thing that worries me about Robert Whittaker is southpaws have been able to hurt him, and it hasn't always just been southpaws. Left-sided attacks can catch Robert Whittaker. You look at Darren Till, he caught him with an elbow on the way in. You look at Adesanya, he catched him with a left hook. It's just something that I'm a little concerned about. I'm not saying it's going to show up in this fight, but when you're dealing with a southpaw with really good hand speed and really good power in Kelvin Gastelum, those are holes in Robert Whittaker's defense that I'm going to look for.
Kelvin Gastelum's one of those guys. He's not big for 85. He was a former welterweight. So is Whittaker, former welterweight that really found his home and all of his success at 85. Almost like Rumble Johnson. Didn't do it at 70. Didn't really do it at 85. 205 was his calling. For Gastelum, is he too small of a guy at middleweight? Maybe. I'm not going to say that. He has a great nutritionist as his girlfriend. We saw that all over the posters the last time out and in the embeddeds in his last fight taking on Ian Heinisch. Well, Ian Heinisch got worked out in the back by a guy in jeans and no t-shirt. It was really, really
It was
weird.
so weird.
Ian, how do you feel? Is this
How you
positionally
doing?
good?
Is this okay for you, Ian?
And for Ian, it was weird for him too because his fight before the Gerald Meerschaert fight, he was Bangkok ready. He was training out of Thailand. His last time wasn't able to do that, but also wasn't able to get back at elevation. So he's kind of like working out.
You're already doing it, Craig. Stop.
Keeping steady.
No, you can't say that Kelvin Gastelum has never had a good one in the UFC because I see where this is going.
Let's get into Kelvin Gastelum's career. What is this guy good at? Does he throw a lot of kicks? Not a ton of kicks. But what he does is box inside to perfection. And his boxing in close is some of the best that you're going to find in all of MMA. And his wrestling. His wrestling was good early on, but then his striking really caught up and he became a great striker. In his last fight, we get to see everything that is Kelvin Gastelum, and he looked amazing against Ian Heinisch.
He really did. And that's the thing about Kelvin Gastelum. Everyone wants to talk about the boxing or the cardio or the hand speed. He's a very well-rounded mixed martial artist. He is. And I know you're going to talk about the loss to Jack Hermanson. That's the one loss that, yeah, he did look really bad in. But I think every MMA fighter has that one loss that they'd love to take back. If every Dustin Poirier fight, we kept on bringing up the fact that he lost to Michael Johnson, you guys would be tired of it. Because there are some losses in guys' careers that I think you can throw out. I think that was a weird position against an awkward fighter that he wasn't ready for. And I think it was as simple as that. I really do. And here's the great news. I don't really think you can take a lot from the Marshman fight, or not the Hermanson fight, sorry, and take that and look at what Robert Whittaker's going to do to Gastelum and think anything similar is going to happen. The thing about Whittaker that I do think will pay huge dividends in this fight is his speed advantage on the outside. Now, on the inside with hands, I do favor Kelvin Gastelum. I do think his boxing will give Robert Whittaker just weird trouble. I do. I think Kelvin Gastelum's technically very, very sound, and he's good defensively. And I know he has got hit in his previous fights. I know he's been hit by Adesanya. Of course, he got dropped.
Adesanya.
But other than Adesanya, Kelvin Gastelum is one of the best chins, I'd argue, ever in MMA. I really do have Kelvin Gastelum in that, like, Vicente Luque chin area, because you can hit him with absolute bombs, and the majority of the time, he just walks right through it. Like, you can beat Kelvin Gastelum. I'm not saying he's the perfect fighter, but it's very hard to beat Kelvin Gastelum, and even when you do it, you're going to get damaged while you do it, and that's the only thing that worries me. Robert Whittaker, you kind of mentioned it. Yeah, he's only 29. Yeah, he's had a lot of 30, sorry. Yeah, he's had a lot of hard fights in the past. That's the one question mark that I don't really know about. Is Robert Whittaker shop worn? And if so, to what degree? Of course, he's not like BJ Penn. Like, if Robert Whittaker fought a guy outside of a bar, I would bet every dollar I have Robert Whittaker could beat him. But the issue is, in his last few fights, we have seen him get dropped. Darren Till was able to drop him, and then he hurt him at the end of the fight as well. Jared Cannonier, people try to say Whittaker got hurt in that fight with that weird jab. I've watched that fight about 90 times, and like Luke Thomas with Max Holloway and Volkanovski too. He didn't. He just got hit by a weird shot. It kind of phased him, but he was good. But then you look, Adesanya drops him, Yoel drops him, Till drops him. Kelvin Gastelum has power, and he has very good power at that. If he's able to hurt Robert Whittaker, does Whittaker still have the recovery in the chin to take those big blows from Gastelum? So for me, this fight is a big question mark of where is Robert Whittaker's durability? Because if we're just looking at the X's and O's, well, if Whittaker stands on the outside in this fight and doesn't get brought into a brawl, I'm pretty confident he could win. Like, Robert Whittaker, great movement on the feet. That's one thing we haven't talked about. His back and forth, like, weird shift. Robert Whittaker, he's not really a karate fighter, and he's not really a boxer. He's this cool kind of fusion of the two where he can incorporate a lot of kicks into his game, but sometimes he can just go punch heavy. And you see the boxing of Whittaker is still very technically sound.
Great combinations from not just Robert Whittaker, and that's going to be the focus from a lot of people out there. The one thing, does he dip his head a little bit when he gets out of it? You know exactly what it's going to be. It's the same thing with Loopy Godinez on this card. 1, 2, down the pipe, continues the forward motion, great jab. Robert Whittaker does a lot of things very well. In similar regard, it's just at the very highest level against the best competition. Robert Whittaker's takedown defense, very, very, very good. Legendary. Some would say legendary, especially in MMA, and that's a thing. Very good, very technically proficient. Is he one of those guys that I almost have in that like Anderson Silva category of, well, if it goes to the ground, is he good at the ground? Probably, yeah.
He's good at everything else.
Just don't see it very often. But you know that technically he's going to be quite adept. You know who he's going to have in his corner traveling with him. Jacob Malkoun. Oh, they made you pay for that Phil Hawes fight. But you got the fight out of Whittaker that ended up quite well. So if I do look, Matt, at the odds for this fight, Robert Whittaker is a decent favorite at this point. He opened up at a minus 275. He's a minus 264. Some money has come in on Gastelum. Gastelum opened a plus 220. He's a plus 211 right now. If we look at the Topology votes, and again, full transparency, I don't look at these before we start these videos. So it's a surprise now. Oh man, 1,139 of them, 92% Whittaker, 70% by decision. The 8% that have Gastelum, 63% by knockout. That's fine. That's fair. Gastelum could do it. I think this is going to be an absolute war of attrition. I love the matchup. If you like Gastelum and Adesanya, if you like Whittaker, I don't know, against Till, let's not talk about Adesanya or Romero. I think you're going to get a great fight here. I love this for both guys. For Whittaker, originally supposed to take on Paulo Costa, probably the title eliminator for this one. It's weird because it probably isn't. I love the fight. What's the pick at the end?
So my official pick, I am going to pick Robert Whittaker. I am ever so slightly going to pick him. And I understand, in the Tapology breakdown of the votes, the majority of the people who are picking Gastelum are picking him to win by TKO KO. And that makes sense. I'm not saying Whittaker's chinny. It's just I have seen him get dropped by very heavy-handed strikers. The thing about Whittaker, though, he has great recovery. He's not a guy... There's fighters who, when they get dropped, they can never really get back into the fight after they do get hurt, and they're so tender from that point on. Bobby Knuckles over here, War Knuckles, that's when the fight kind of starts. He gets dropped, and then he gets better because of it. It's like, oh, okay, I can eat your power, now I can move forward comfortably. And if he is moving forward, using his combinations like getting against Jared Cannonier, another southpaw, very heavy-handed striker, might not have the hand speed of Kelvin Gastelum, but still, there are a few parallels there. I do like Robert Whittaker. I think, yeah, if he can move forward and land in combinations, the kicks of Whittaker are absurd. And if he's able to land that 1-2 head kick on Gastelum, it's probably going to put him away.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of tough to get caught up in the noise because for Whittaker, former champ, he was the guy that, was it the Whittaker era, like the Machida era? Maybe not, but you have to like the wins that he has in his back pocket. For Gastelum, he's had so many close fights, so many tough fights. That Adesanya fight, a fight of the year. And then the bookend of the losses, the Hermanson one, man, like, ugh, you hate it. But he did come back better than ever in the fight against Ian Heinisch. And listen, is Ian Heinisch a great fighter? I don't know. He's a good fighter. I do know that. And it was a quality win for Gastelum. You can't take that one away from him. But again, I agree with you. It's not an ever so slight edge for me. I do like Whittaker in this fight quite a bit, and I know a lot of people out there do too. If you go into the YouTube community tab, you can vote for it. If you go over to our Instagram on Saturday before question mark kicks, you can vote for it. We talk all about it. Maybe there's some picks that we change. Maybe there's some fights that we kind of rack our brains around. The weight cut for Abdul Razak Al Hassan, what does it look like over on on Friday? But for me, I'm in agreement here. I do like Whittaker.
Again, here's another little thing that I never forgot about. And again, if I think about it, I feel like I can tell you guys. Kelvin Gastelum almost missed weight against Michael Bisping. I know it was at middleweight. I know he's never missed weight at middleweight. I still don't think this weight cut's that easy for Kelvin Gastelum, even though he is a small fighter for this division. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it has been, I don't want to say a disturbing trend in the past, but it has been a trend that Kelvin Gastelum, I don't know what it is. I'm not even going to speculate, but he has a hard time making weight in either division. Just kind of look out for that, because I don't even think this weight cut's easy for Kelvin Gastelum. And the last point, you had kind of mentioned how Whittaker was a welterweight moving up to middleweight. The difference between these two is Robert Whittaker could never make 170 again. Physically, he has really built himself into a middleweight, and to the point where when he was fighting Yoel Romero, who's a massive middleweight, they matched up pretty similarly. Like, Robert Whittaker's a big jack guy at middleweight, whereas Kelvin Gastelum, you look at him, I think Kelvin Gastelum could probably make 170 again in his career. I might not recommend it. I don't know how hard that weight cut is. I'm sure it's not easy.
You just said it was.
No. I just don't think he's a fighter who is in the best physical shape for his division. I think Kelvin Gastelum could become a better fighter at middleweight if he did retool a few things in his camp. But again, he could go out there and finish Whittaker. That's the one caveat, but yeah, I like Whittaker.
Can the Rafael Cordero plan work out?
It
has for a lot of fighters recently. We'll see if it will for Kelvin Gastelum, but we're both going with Robert Whittaker. Make sure you check out Fight Night Picks question mark kicks at the end of the week. It's 2 hours before the prelims every Saturday, where you get a final opportunity to make our final picks, and you get to go off of those for the week. I offer up the Fight Night Picks question mark kicks parlay, and oh boy, been knocking those ones out of the park, so I can't wait for that. We got great content lined up for this week. Already a lot of good interviews banked. You've got the one for Tony Gravely out already. I already teased Kai Kamaka, but I've got some Bellator stuff coming up with some really big fighters, so can't wait for it. Make sure you check out that stuff. We got some great stuff this week as well, outside of just the predictions. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.